welcome to our participants today. We thank you for joining us for this workforce adjustment information session. My name is Felipe Godoy. I'm part of the member engagement team here at PIPS. I'm also joined by my colleague and co-host Kat Ganon, as well as Stephanie Ehler, Dean Tonsik, and Christine Poirier from the National Policy Office. To begin, we would like to take some time to respectfully acknowledge that our office, located in Ottawa, is on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. Before this land was a city, it was and remains a place for the Algonquin Anishinaabe people, whose presence here reaches back over 8,000 years. As settlers, it is our responsibility to educate ourselves on the history of the First Peoples, to learn how to be respectful of their culture, to acknowledge their pain and our part in it. This journey of understanding is uncomfortable, but part of the discovering our past and how we continue to benefit from it is a duty to grow and to change in order to want to do better. Working towards change, we can be hopeful that our journey guides us to a peaceful, inclusive, and respectful future, one where we can hope to have done the work required to be seen as guests of this great land and its First Peoples, and to be part of their community. If you started the journey of learning whose territory you work on or live on, we invite you to make an acknowledgement in our Q&A. At the beginning of our webinar, we'd like to provide you with the equity statement, which clearly outlines our expectations from participants. If you could please take a moment to review the statement, the link is in the chat box. As noted, the Professional Institute of the Public Service of Canada strives to create a climate that is respectful, safe, inclusive, where we all feel welcome and valued, and where we are supported to make our contributions to support others to make theirs. We thank you for being a part of this inclusive space. Now we'll go over some key information about Zoom. Due to the size of the group, we have muted your computers to ensure we have the best sound quality for everyone participating and for those who will watch later. Please use the Q&A icon in Zoom to send us a message if you have any questions or technical issues during the webinar. Today, we are lucky to be joined by our PIPS President, Sean O'Reilly. Welcome, Sean. I believe you'd like to say a few words before we begin.
Thank you, Felipe. Thank you for everyone attending today. In a few minutes, you're going to get some information on WFA and how it works in the federal sphere. We want to prepare our members to be ready for an understanding of how WFA works. We never want to see cuts to the public service, and we also need to have everyone ready and understanding how it's going to work in the federal sphere. That being said, there's going to be a lot of information given to you today about WFA. As a union, and I think as everyone here is attending knows that there's a federal election going on. Outside of what you're going to hear today, some of the nuts and bolts information from our staff and our subject matter experts is PIPS as a union is going to be pushing back and also having conversations during the federal election campaign on the various things that come with workforce adjustment. It's very key that we want, as much as Canadian taxpayers do, a public service that has the best talent and is ready and capable to serve any need necessary that comes to face the Canadian people. We want a public service that is as diverse as this country, and usually with workforce adjustment, it harms the most vulnerable citizens in our society. And also, too, you as public servants are left doing more with less. So what we're going to be doing during the federal election campaign is we're going to be pushing for proper staffing levels to allow for quality service delivery. We want sustainable workloads to protect our members' well-being, transparency about the real impacts of these cuts on Canadians, recognition that the hidden costs of workforce adjustment far outweigh the apparent savings, and we definitely want to protect our diverse talent and institutional knowledge. You're going to receive some great information today, and I think it's going to be good to inform you as we go forward. We're going to continue to push on any kind of cuts to the public service, and when it comes to workforce adjustment, we're going to be ensuring that our members' rights are protected and that you're able to continue to serve the Canadian people as you do great every day in and out. Thank you so much, and I really look forward to the information you're going to receive today, and we are here to support you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sean. Really appreciate that. Today, we're going to be discussing, like Sean said, workforce adjustment in the public service and how it may affect you. We will have a question and answer period at the end of our session, and now I'll pass it over to Dean and Stephanie to begin the session. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you so very much. I will begin our session, and One of our main goals is to make sure that you start to become familiar with the Workforce Adjustment Appendix, what it means, and what it entails. It's very important to note that the WFA appendices within the PIPSC collective agreements differ from the NJC Workforce Adjustment Directives. Some bargaining agents have opted into the NJC WFA directives, although PIPS has not. You'll find that information within your respective collective agreement. This is one of the first information sessions being hosted by PIPS in 2025, and we hope to have time for questions at the end of our slide deck. If you could help us out, if you could help us help other members in the future, and please do take a moment and type your question into the chat, and we'll aim to ensure that the documents on the PIPS website are living documents and updated with the information that you would appreciate. Next slide, please. What is WFA? WFA is the acronym for Workforce Adjustment. WFA outlines the process of change. It applies to only indeterminate employees of the core public administration specified within Schedules 1 and 4 of the Financial Administration Act, for which the Public Service Commission has the sole authority to appoint, and separate agencies like CFIA and CRA. The primary objective of WFA is continued employment by maximizing employment opportunities while minimizing layoffs for indeterminate workers. PIPSC's role is to ensure departments properly implement WFA provisions and support members in accessing all benefits and options available to them. The WFA appendix in your collective agreement outlines your rights, roles, and responsibilities and options available to you. We're here to represent and support members accessing your benefits as well as educating you. Next slide, please. The WFA process. The trigger for this appendix to apply is the departmental notice. The department decides that the services of one or more indeterminate employees will no longer be required beyond a specified date. The department must advise the president of PIPS in writing not less than 2 working days prior to notifying affected employees, and is required to consult with PIPS as completely as possible throughout the entire process. This written notification should include information as specified within your collective agreement. And while 2 days is the minimum notification period, this is far from the best practice. The information is provided in advance in confidence to enable support available for the membership, as well as to ensure the Institute can ensure that your rights are being protected throughout the process. An indeterminate employee receives notification that his or her services may no longer be required beyond a specified date. This means that you would be affected. Step 1 within the WFA process. Sorry, next slide. The conditions for WFA are the following: a lack of work. So this is a program ceasing, the discontinuance of a function or project, relocation of a work unit, or the closure of an office or work location. Next slide, please. Your official written notification will likely include the reason for the affected notice. The employee is considered affected under the Workforce Adjustment Appendix. An indeterminate employee receives notification that your services in the position, your substantive position, may no longer be required beyond a specified date. Of note, this notification is for your substantive position. It's not an acting position. Although if you are currently tied to a different substantive position, you would be in receipt. The letter would be attached to your affected substantive position. At this point, if you are a visual learner, you may want to visit the PIPS website and look at the WFA flowchart we have. The affected status means that the employee is part of a group of workers who may be workforce adjustment or made surplus. At this point in the process, it doesn't mean that the employee will be workforce adjustment. At the next slide, we have step 2. At step 2, there are 3 possibilities. The first possibility is that nothing else will happen. You are in receipt of an affected letter, and that is simply it. There's no defined timeline in between the receipt of an affected letter and the step 2. The notifications within step 1 and step 2 could happen at the same time or have days, weeks, or months in between them. You continue to work and be paid your salary throughout this time, although you're mindful of other opportunities. The second possibility is if you receive a surplus status with a guarantee of a reasonable job offer. This is often called GRJO. The third option at this point is if you receive written notification that your services are no longer required without the guarantee of a reasonable job offer, you would become an opting employee. So we've gone over 3 terms at this point. Affected is the first notification letter. You can stay affected, or the second possibility is surplus status, where you would be with a guarantee of a reasonable job offer, GRJO, or you could become an opting employee, and we'll go over the options. Next slide, please. What is a reasonable job offer? An offer of indeterminate employment in the core public administration or a separate agency. This is not a term offer. This is not a part-time offer if you are full-time. This is normally at the equivalent level, so the same group and level. The employee must be trainable and mobile. And the geographic area, these come from the NJC Travel Directive. In some circumstances, reasonable may include a lower level position appointment with salary protection. Next slide, please. Surplus status with a guarantee of a reasonable job offer. Once a guarantee of a reasonable job offer is issued, the employee is placed on paid surplus priority status and is expected to continue to be assigned meaningful work. There's no time frame to this position, to this status. Your legislated entitlement to the employee for priority appointment to another position within the core public administration or separate agency for which you meet the essential qualifications remains. This would include language levels as well. Next slide. A reasonable job offer, accepted or rejected. So if you are in receipt of a GRJO, its surplus status letter, you may be in receipt of a reasonable job offer. That would resolve the WFA situation. If you are appointed to a lower level position at this time, the employee is salary protected and you're in place on reinstatement priority status for reappointment to your former level. That salary protection only stays for that first appointment. This would not carry through to a subsequent appointment. If the employee refuses a reasonable job offer, you are laid off, although not sooner than 6 months from the beginning of the surplus period. That's not the affected period, that's a second notice. You have layoff priority status with the Public Service Commission for 1 year, and you are considered laid off for severance pay purposes. If you are If the third option applies to you, if you become an opting employee, that means there is no GRJO, no guarantee of a reasonable job offer. You receive a letter from the deputy head, the employer, and you have 120 days to choose amongst options A, B, or C. You cannot change your option once one is selected. And if you do not select one, option A is deemed to be selected. Option A is continued surplus status. So if you would like to stay within the public service, you can use the entirety of the 120 days and stay on that. The employee is eligible for any option if a reasonable job offer for which does not require relocation is made during the 120-day opting period and prior to the receipt of the employee's written choice. So within that 120 days, you can certainly be in receipt of a reasonable job offer, and that would take away your opting status. And I will pass it to Dean to go over the options.
Thank you, Stephanie. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. So let's get into option A, surplus priority status. What is that? So it's a 12-month limited entitlement to surplus priority rights for appointment to other positions in the public service without recourse. If the employee does not receive a reasonable job offer within that period, the employee will be laid off. Pay in lieu of unfulfilled surplus period may be authorized to a surplus employee who offers to resign before the end of the 12-month surplus period. The lump sum payment is equal to the surplus regular pay for the balance of the surplus period up to a maximum of 6 months. So essentially, you'll continue to be paid at your current level and salary, and during that 12-month period, the goal is obviously to secure indeterminate employment. However, if you do not receive a reasonable job offer within that period, you'll be laid off. Now, you may ask, well, what is a reasonable job offer? We talked about the salary has to be the same level, ideally, classification, but it could be at equivalent positions. They also have to take into account your personal suitability, your skills, your experience, your background, right? So it wouldn't be reasonable if you're a scientist and they offer you to do procurement work, right? And then there's issue potentially with salary discrepancies, but also you may deem that unreasonable because you're a scientist. You may have the qualifications. You may be able to have transferable skills, but ultimately, you have a right to deny to reject that, and we can challenge them on that basis and say it's not reasonable, right? So they have to look at not only salary, but whether or not you have the competencies. You may have the competencies, but you want to work as a scientist. Or vice versa, you're a procurement officer and they want to offer you a job as a meteorologist. Well, there's a big gap there. Unless you have the qualifications to do so, it will be deemed unreasonable. Now, the employer also has to look at trainability. They have an obligation to ensure that, well, maybe you don't meet all of the criteria. I mean, you have to meet the essential qualifications, whether it's language and some of the core competencies. But if it's just a question of bridging a gap, well, they have to ensure that they provide you with training or other resources. So it's not just a paper exercise, right? They need to look at you and your background and try to find a job that's most suitable for you. So that needs to be considered, and staff, whether you're steward or internally to PIPS, we can guide you through that. Next slide, please. Option B. So you can also opt for the transition support measure. So it's a cash payment based on employees' years of service in the public service. Employees must resign without priority rights. The lump sum amounts, it's a cash amount ranging from 4 to 52 weeks. salary dependent upon your years of service and as specified in the collective agreement. Considered laid off for severance pay purposes. So I want to just draw a distinction between the regular severance. So those, back in 2012, thereabout, they stopped accruing a severance entitlement based on years of service. So at the time, folks had the opportunity to either cash in part or in whole their severance, or they can choose to defer it until their retirement age. And then the benefit of that would be, well, if you choose to defer your cash out of your severance, it'll be at the salary, the current salary, right? So this is on top of that. So it won't be, they're not going to reduce any amounts. So this is cumulative. I just wanted to make that clarification. Management establishes a departure date. Obviously, we want flexibility, have a discussion with management that, we'll work out the best possible date. You are entitled to funds for financial and job placement counseling services. So that's equal to about $1,200, up to $1,200. So this is, if you want to consult someone externally, financial expert, a financial advisor, someone, offers tax services. This is in addition to the services we offer internally in terms of, we have a pensions and benefits team that can help you go through, the ramifications from a pension perspective and whatnot. And then, we have our dedicated staff who can help navigate the process. Should you choose option B, you relinquish any priority rights for reappointment. Next slide, please. You can also, as option C, go for an education allowance. So what is an education allowance? So, you can resign, see option B for the transition support measure, or delay departure date and go on leave without pay for a maximum of 2 years while attending a learning institution. Now, the question is, who has a say in terms of what learning institution, if you opt for this option, you determine where you want to study, what you want to study. The employer has no say in it. There's only one requirement, and we'll see later, is that you have to show a proof of registration, but you decide where and what you want to study. So it's same cash payment as a TSM, plus up to $17,000 for educational purposes. I just want to also make note of the leave without pay. So you'll consider leave without pay. So it may impact your pension and benefits. So normally, when you go on leave without pay, you are given the option to retain your benefit entitlements. Your public service healthcare plan, and or the pension plan. You can choose to have that period counted as pensionable. What you need to consider, though, is it may cost more because you will have to pay your share and the employer share for pension and for health and for your health benefits premiums. So that's another financial consideration. Essentially, you'll be paying double the contribution, right? So financially, you need to take that into account. I mean, you can choose not to count your time as pensionable if your intent is not to return to the public service. But even if you're not returning, you still have that option of having that time counted as pensionable. And if you want to retain your health and benefits, if you're single, or if you're your family and in a family setting, and no one else, your spouse or partner doesn't have coverage, it's a big consideration. So at the end of the 2 years, the employee is laid off unless the employee has found alternate employment within the public service. Right. So within that 2 years, you're attending school, and you're hoping to, for those who want to remain in the public service, you're looking to find employment. Next slide, please. Okay, alternation. What is alternation? So alternation refers to an option whereby an opting employee, not a surplus employee, who wishes to remain in the core public administration exchanges positions with a non-affected employee. The alternate willing to leave the core public administration, and you would be entitled to the transition support measure or an education allowance. So essentially, um, you know, you want to remain in the public service. You don't want to be laid off. You don't want to take any of the options. Someone who wants to leave, is maybe near retirement age, wants to pursue a career elsewhere, then you can exchange alternate positions. All departments must participate in the alternation process, so a department cannot deny or cannot say we're not participating. A department, cannot provide unreasonable justifications not to participate or to deny an alternation. So there are recourse mechanisms there should it happen. To our knowledge, it does not happen frequently. When it does happen, but there are recourse rights. So you should be mindful of that. So the alternation must result in the permanent elimination of the position and requires management approval. However, approval cannot be unreasonably withheld. Again, it's not an unfettered discretion. Obviously, you have to meet the essential qualifications of the position, but again, the manager has to have the discretion. But again, we can challenge that discretion if they applied unreasonably for whatever reason. Abuse of authority. There's an element of discrimination and whatnot. Like there are varying factors that come into play, but you're not without recourse. Next slide, please. So alternation is available from the start of the 120-day opting period until the 1-year surplus period. So the employee must meet the position requirements of the position they are alternating into, and alternation must occur on a specified date agreeable to the department. So you have up to a year to hopefully have a successful alternation. Alternation can take place between employees in the same group and level or equivalent positions as long as salary discrepancies do not exceed 6%. So, it could be within the same classification or a comparable position. Then we look at salary, and provided that it doesn't exceed 6%. So those are the conditions. Next slide, please. SERLO process. I'm sure many of you have heard about the SERLO process. This is the process that is at the tail end. So, it's determined that, one department has only 5 positions for 7 employees, right? So out of those 7, 5 will get the position. So what process is in place to allocate or to offer those positions to those 5 employees. So the concept is this SERLO process, which is a selection for retention or layoff. It's overseen by the Public Service Commission of Canada, and it's a structured approach used during workforce adjustments to determine which employees will be retained and which will be laid off. This process is distinct from typical appointment procedures, as it involves employees who have already met the merit criteria for the current positions. So you'll ask, well, I already meet the essential qualifications of positions. Why do I have to compete again for my position, right? I already meet the requirements. Well, because it's a legislated process, so it's the intent of the legislator. As you know, staffing, currently we can't negotiate staffing, right? So the employer determines the process, and they deemed this process to be the most equitable or fair. And again, they apply the merit principle. You may ask, does seniority come into play? So, I may have 20 years seniority in the public service in my position that I'm competing for, and I'm competing against with someone who has maybe 5 years. they don't look at seniority. They look at basically merit, as is the process for other staffing exercises. And again, it's not unfettered. It's not an unfettered process. They still have to be fair and equitable. Management retains the discretion in terms of how they want to proceed, whether it's just by having a written examination, or they want to include interviews. They want to do verify your references. It's at management's discretion. So it may differ from one department to another, but as long as it's fair and consistently applied. And again, there are recourse rights there. Should someone not be retained for whatever reason, we can't challenge the fact that the position's being eliminated, but we can challenge whether we're not retained for a position. Similar to the recourse rights we see before the Public Service Labor Relations Board, there's a branch that deals specifically with challenging staffing actions. And there are various reasons. They didn't accommodate you during the examination process. They didn't give you the tools necessary. They didn't allow you to write or conduct the examination in the language of your choice. So there's a few, this is the grand, these are just but some examples where there's potential, say, abuse, and that you can challenge. So employees impacted by the SERLO process will be formally notified in writing if an employee occupies a position identified as affected, or if they are performing similar duties. They will be included in the process, right? So this is all employees. The employer has an obligation to inform all employees impacted. So this also includes people who are on leave without pay. If you're on leave without pay, mat leave without pay for relocation of a spouse, sick leave. But the employer must ensure that they've notified you. If you haven't received a notification, we can argue that this is null and void, doesn't apply to you, that the timelines that are triggered by this process cannot be applied to you if you weren't notified. And the employer must make reasonable effort to inform you. Next slide, please. Okay, now we're going to talk about the voluntary departure program. What is the voluntary departure program? So the voluntary departure program supports employees leaving the public service when placed in affected status prior to entering a SERLO process. So the VDP is not applicable to those who are in receipt of a guaranteed reasonable job offer. The employer shall establish these programs for workforce adjustment situations featuring 5 or more affected employees at the same group and level who will not receive a guarantee of a reasonable job offer. The program will be established. Employees who volunteer will be made opting employees. So if you volunteer, you have option A, B, or C. If there are more volunteers than the amount of positions to be eliminated, seniority will be used. Interestingly, this is the only area where seniority is taken into account, is when there are more volunteers than offers that could be made. So it's interesting that this is the only time they use seniority. Next slide, please. Okay, let's talk about the employer. What are the employer obligations? Well, first and foremost, they must maximize employment opportunities for indeterminate employees. Ensure that employees are given every reasonable opportunity to continue their careers in the public service, and that employees are treated equitably. Now, again, it's for indeterminate employees, WFA. It doesn't, term employees have no rights under the workforce adjustment, so this only applies to indeterminate employees. They must consult with unions as completely and as soon as possible and establish workforce adjustment committees. So these committees are established when employees are affected in a certain department. So once, if we're given notice that there may be cuts, they must establish these workforce adjustment committees. And it's through these committees that we can vet the information, ask the employer, okay, well, what have you done to minimize potential layoffs or cuts, right? So this is the committee where we can hold them to account. So do we have to ensure that they carry out effective human resources planning, including the review of the use of private, temporary agencies, personnel, consultants, contractors, term employees, and all other non-indeterminate employees, and where possible, not to re-engage them when it will facilitate the appointment of surplus or laid off persons. So during these committee meetings, we can ask, well, have you looked at all your contractors and consultants? This is work that could be performed by our members who are affected, who may be laid off. That work should be given to them, and you shouldn't be eliminating any positions, right? So that's why it's important to hold these committees and to have representatives. And usually we have a staff representative who will sit at these committees, because we have to ensure that the collective agreement is being enforced and applied, and to ensure that your rights are being protected. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you. Oh, this comes to an end. My presentation. I'll send it back to Felipe.
Thank you so much, Dean, and thank you so much, Stephanie, for all the information. We'll now take some time to answer any questions you might have about WFA. If you would like to ask our panelists a question, please use the Q&A tool located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We'll do our best to answer your questions. And if we run out of time, or if you think of a question post-webinar, please reach out to your local steward or send us a message through the Ask Us form. The links to both of those will be in the chat shortly. We'll look to provide all participants with a webinar recording and the resources we mentioned today, so keep an eye out in the email in the following weeks. We post those on the chat. And as far as questions, here I'll start very top. What happens if the notification is issued while the indeterminate employee is on leave without pay and outside of the country, thereby without access to their work computer?
Right. So the employer the employer will be aware that the employee is out of the country, whether on personal leave or on a secondment or working abroad. So they have to make every reasonable effort to ensure that an employee receives notification. If you don't have a computer, it'd be difficult, no mail. So we would argue that, well, unless you get notification, you can't be aware, because you can't exercise your rights. So in that circumstance, although exceptional, I think we would make an argument that the timeline should not be applied until you are informed and receipt of this formal notification, because otherwise, it's prejudicial. It's prejudicial to your rights. So we would definitely argue that the period only starts when you are provided with the formal notification.
Is there a maximum amount of time that an employee can be considered affected, quote unquote?
No, there's no maximum amount of time.
Is there a sunset clause to the salary protection?
Only if you leave. So if you leave position, so if you're provided a reasonable job offer and there's salary protection, the 6% comes into play for, then your salary protected. But if you then leave for another position, the salary protection comes to an end. But while you remain in the position, it could go on indefinitely.
Okay. On salary protection, what do you mean? What is salary protection? What do you mean by it's not protected beyond first assignment?
So essentially that means, because of the rules, they say you can normally, when it has to be, you have to be offered a reasonable job offer, has to be at level, or it can't, it can be a little lower or less. So it's 4%. And in that regard, so that 4%, so your salary protect, you're making a bit less money in the reasonable job offer that you received. So because of staffing rules, that's how the staffing rules operate. So once you remain in that position, your salary protected. I mean, um, you'll get your increments and whatnot. So if you're making more, so you're essentially your salary protected, you're making more in a lesser position. That's what it means. So you're in a position that's 4% less. But if you leave that position, um, and you take another position, then there's no more salary protection. So you're hoping to get an equivalent position at your previous job, but the job for which you received a guaranteed or reasonable job or maybe lesser pay with the maximum, but you'll get the higher pay as long as you remain in that position.
If we work for an agency, are the WFA rules different than the core public service?
Some collective agreements, for example, the CRA, they're essentially, I mean, the core is the same, like in terms of the amount, the option, but some differ in terms of the wording. So I know that, like, for example, if you work for the CRA, the language there in the Workforce Adjustment Directive is slightly different than from the core administration, but essentially they're the same principles. And the process, the guarantee of a reasonable job offer, all these key concepts are similar, just some variations in the wording. But for example, the education allowance is the same, the 17, the $17,000. You have 120 days to make a decision for the option. So the key concepts are similar, but there are slight variations. So that's why we want to ensure that you are looking at the right collective agreement. And obviously, we can assist you or your steward to ensure that we're looking, at your collective agreement.
Okay. Do you have to apply for other offers, or will they offer the job to the employees automatically if there is one? If we declare surplus, does the employee search for a job, or do they wait for one to be offered to them?
I think taking a proactive approach is important because there's no, the employer makes their effort, make a reasonable effort. We don't doubt their good faith, but if you want to maximize your opportunities, I think it's important to take a proactive approach for sure make sure, to ensure potential, indeterminate employment. So you want to definitely maximize your chances by being actively involved for sure.
Are there any limits on what type of job role you can be placed in? For example, can a scientist be placed in an admin role?
Right. No, it has to be, again, they have to, in this circumstance, they look at the position, they look at the individual, right? So, when they cut positions, they look at the position. They don't look at the individual, right? So they're not supposed to target someone and say, I want to eliminate this job because I don't, I want to, I don't want that person employed there anymore. No, when they do workforce adjustment, they always cuts are based on the work. But when it comes to, it's reversed when they make a reasonable job offer. It has to be reasonable based on your current, classification, rate of pay, your background. So it would be unreasonable for someone to offer, I'm a scientist, I'm offered an administrative role. That's not reasonable because you look at the salary, and you look at, there's such a discrepancy, and you look at the qualifications. Yes, I could potentially, learn to be an administrative assistant, but no, I'm a scientist. I have a right to pursue my career as a scientist. So it has to be, again, commensurate. And there's, again, the 4% rule, right? So just from a salary perspective, it would be deemed unreasonable. But they
Uh,
do look at trainability. Sorry, Philly, if I want to add. So if I was an equivalent role and they say, oh, you don't meet the ascent, there's a little gap. Well, they have to offer you training and the ability to meet those requirements. They can't just look at the boxes and say, you don't meet the exact qualifications. As long as you meet the core, the essential qualifications, and maybe there's some training that could get you up to speed, the employer has to look at that, because their role and their obligation is to ensure to maximize employment opportunities. Sorry. Thank you.
Great. Who decides what is a reasonable job offer? Does a reasonable job offer take into account any DTAs you may have in place?
Absolutely. Well, reasonable has to take in, again, we look at the individual. So if I have a duty to accommodate, then they have to look at me holistically. They have to look at what my requirements are. They have to take into account, so they can't, if I have mobility issues, for example, and I'm a scientist, but I work, my part of my DTA is to work work from home, or just work from the office because I have mobility issues. They can then turn around and say, well, we're going to give you, you're going to retain the type of work you do, the salary, but you're going to have to be in the field, right? We're going to require you to go in the field, and but that won't be in keeping with the duty to accommodate. So again, we can challenge them on that basis to say, no, this is discriminatory. You're not meeting your duty to accommodate, and we can challenge them on that basis and say, no, this is not a reasonable job offer.
Can you tell us what departments have started WFA processes? Are all departments going to do WFA?
So far, only 2 departments. And the amount of people, like contrary to, for example, our colleagues at the PSAC, there a lot more are affected. But for so far 2, and we're not aware of anyone having been laid off yet. They haven't gotten to that stage yet. And those are the only 2. To answer your question, are all departments going to be workforce adjusting their employees? I can't say. I mean, I could say not all. I'm pretty sure that not all will. How many will? We don't know. We're not given notice in advance. We're not aware of any. They don't consult us in terms of what positions will be cut. So far, only 2 departments, and only a small amount of people have been impacted.
And those 2 departments are the IRCC and the ATSSC, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Do contractors have to be let go first before FTEs can be let go?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. The employer has an obligation to look at all the non-indeterminate employees, contractors, consultants. They even look at term employees as well.
Great. Do FTEs with higher seniority have priority over new hires?
No, seniority does not come into play. It's all based on merit. And again, they don't. So seniority is not a factor into the process.
This is sort of relating to PSAC. Can a PSAC and PIPS employee switch if their job descriptions and essential qualifications match?
Yeah, it's not along bargaining units. There's no restriction there. It's if it's at level, right? Just look at the salary. Again, you have to meet the essential qualifications. If you do, and you look at the salary, if there's no that 4%, if it doesn't exceed that 4% gap, yeah. So there's no limit. You can go into transfer into another bargaining unit for sure.
Great. If an employee is on leave, will they still be considered or notified if they are being selected for WFA? I think you might have answered that earlier.
Yeah, they need to, if they're notified in their receipt, they have all the privileges and rights as any other employee. So the employer must make all the rights afforded under the collective agreement under the WFA directive applies to them as well.
Okay. We'll do a couple more. For option B, if I have already taken my severance in 2014, am I entitled to additional severance at the point of layoff?
Yes. This is on top, and above and beyond the original severance, whether you cashed it out or you haven't. This is above and beyond that. So this is additional severance.
Under the volunteer departure program, can pension reduction penalties be waived for employees willing to retire early?
Yes. Yes. So you have to make, so that's the idea of the waiver is to, because for every year you don't meet the threshold, it's permanent 5% reduction, lifetime reduction. So it's a huge amount. So yes, you can apply for a pension waiver, and that's done through your DM, your deputy. They make the application to the pension center on your behalf. You have to sign they sign the form, they fill it out. And to our knowledge, no one has ever been denied a pension waiver if they met the criteria, 55 years, at least 10 years in the public service, you're 5 years from retirement, but you don't have the full, 25 or 30 years, you don't have the magic number. That's when the waiver would apply. And yes, you won't be penalized, but you won't have your full entitlement. You'll retire with the amount of service you've accrued.
If you're on assignment and your substantive is eliminated, are you affected?
Yes, it's always you're a substantive position that is affected. Yes.
This is a two-part question. If someone is in an acting position and receive notification that they are affected, does the salary protection apply for the substantive or acting salary? Additionally, in the case of the guaranteed reasonable job offer, is the offer based on the person's qualifications or the qualifications required by the position? And does it consider their substantive? Is it considered their substantive or acting position?
Yeah, it's always your substantive. So if you're in an acting, or if the acting is affected, well, that the incumbent of the acting that's their substantive. So they would be affected. You would have to return to your substantive. Should your substantive be affected while you're in an acting, well, you will be affected, and the provisions, the WFA provisions kick in. With respect to the reasonable job offer, yes, you have to meet the essential qualifications, whether it's the language or the core competencies, but they have to look at you as well. They have to look at, what your experience, your background. So they definitely have to look at, whether this type of work, is it transferable? Do you have the transferable skills, knowledge, if it's not exactly the same type of work? Ideally, it has to be within the same classification, similar work, but if it's something that you deem, oh yeah, I can with a little training, or if they send me on if they could also send you on training or education in addition, offer you some the courses to bridge the gap. That could be considered a reasonable job offer. But to the question itself, yes, they have to look at, well, you meet the essential minimum requirements, but then they have to look at, well, okay, well, do you have is this a good match based on your experience, your qualification, your education?
For the reasonable job offer, what is a reasonable distance? Is it based on your current office location or your home address?
It's as per the NJC directive, it's the work location. Yeah.
Okay. And we have one last one here. What if there are no equivalent jobs in your department? Can you be offered a job in another department?
Yes. Alternation, all departments must participate. So if I work at D&D and there's no reasonable job offer, there's no position available to me, but I could go work at the CRA, or go work at Procurement Services Canada. Sure. So it's not limited to your department. It's for all the core public administration for which TBS is the employer. So you can go work for CRA, CFIA. So it's not limited to just Treasury Board departments. It applies to agencies as well.
Well, thank you everyone for your questions today. If we didn't get to your question or you think of one after the webinar, please take a moment to review our WFA webpage FAQs, which includes comprehensive FAQs, I should say, and reach out to your local steward or contact us using the Ask Us form. The links are already in the chat. I want to thank Sean. I want to thank Dean, Stephanie, Christine, and Catherine behind the scenes as well for today. Once again, we've included the links to the available WFA resources in the chat. You'll find our webpage with our up-to-date FAQs and resources. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to your local steward or contact us on the Ask Us form. Thanks again, everyone, for participating today, and I hope you have a wonderful afternoon.